BJP, the Aam Aadmi Party, uh, the Communist Party of India, whatever it may be, for a very long time, we've always felt that in cities like Mumbai, in cities like Delhi, in cities like Chennai, Calcutta, Bangalore, we are losing our political identity. We are increasingly becoming apathetic. We increasingly feel that my vote doesn't matter. What I say doesn't matter. And frankly, we haven't been wrong. A good number of years ago, when Rajiv Gandhi was still Prime Minister, he had what I'm going to call an assistant at that time, who was a minister with our portfolio. He is still a minister in the government. And at one point, when I was talking to Mani Shankar Iyer about what we felt the Congress Party should be doing for us, as the people to whom we'd given our vote, Rajiv Gandhi, with his whole environmental change, I moved back to India because of Rajiv Gandhi, because he got people like Sam Pitroda, he got people like me, like Rajiv Desai, to come back to India saying, I will make a change. You as professionals, come back and make that change with me. And when I brought that up with Mani a little later in the administration, Mani's response was, we don't care for your vote. You Malabar Hill types, you Cuff Parade types, you Bandra Pali Hill types, we don't care about your vote. A few years later, and just to balance things out so no one thinks I'm being partisan about the Congress Party, the BJP, a friend of mine, lives not very far down the road from here, looked out of his window and saw slums coming up. Went to his member of parliament, a lady from the BJP, who looked at him and said, how many flats in your building? And he said, I don't know, 20, 30. He said, multiplied by 5, divide by 50% for children. 75 votes, 100 votes. What? 1,000 votes from slum. That's politics, and that's perhaps why we have stayed out. However, someone needs to find a voice. Someone needs to be our voice. And Suraj Sriram, for a number of years, has been that voice for us. Suraj, I'm going to kick off by asking what it takes in a charged political environment, whether it is the Indira Gandhi that you portrayed in your earlier work, whether it's the equivalent of the Aam Aadmi Party that we have right now, whether it's the bureaucrat, the fat cat politician that we see in your work now. What does it take to be that chronicler of our times?
Though we may not appear to be the typical Aam Aadmi, and perhaps if you had a chance to go through my first book where I dedicated to the Aam Aadmi, the Aam Aadmi looks different. Generally we assume that is the person who's disenfranchised. In the second book, it's the same dedication is to the Aam Aadmi, but now that is no longer that person. There are others who are even not necessarily in the lower economic strata who are also disenfranchised. They feel their country has been taken away from them. So basically, I look at life through the eyes of the Aam Aadmi. As I said, in fact, one editor described me as a pseudo Aam Aadmi, which perhaps they were right. The fact remains that I, as a cartoonist, don't look at life through my lens. I look at it through the eyes of the person at the receiving end, who's getting it from all sides. So whenever an issue comes up, I look at it and say, okay, this has happened. What does that man down there, who's perhaps cleaning a car down there, what is his view on that? What is the view of the rickshaw driver who's going there and looking at all this where he has to pay a bribe here or, do something else there just to make a livelihood? What does he think or what does she think? So basically it is, I am looking at life through their eyes and seeing or giving my impression of what they think is what's wrong with the country. To give you a bit of a background, first of all, I want to make a few clarifications. Contrary to what some of you might think, I am not related to Narendra Modi. Okay. Second thing, as regards my last name, again, some of you might think otherwise, but I'm not from South India. I'm from Kashmir. And lastly, though some words have been spoken about me, who am I? I'm a well-known cartoonist nobody knows about. Okay. That said, during the late 70s and up to about the mid 80s, I was the editorial cartoonist, illustrator, and a caricaturist for a couple of, or not couple, almost all the papers published in Bombay. I still call it Bombay. For the Indian Express, the Sunday edition. For Blitz, I don't know if any of you remember Blitz. It used to be a fabulous tabloid with the charismatic R.T. Karanchia as the editor. And I did some wonderful work for them, as well as for the Indian Express. And then perhaps almost every magazine in Bombay used to carry my illustrations and cartoons on the cover or inside. In this period, the late 70s was a period of upheaval in the country. Indira Gandhi had just bounced back after her post-emergency, fall from grace. She had come roaring back, became the prime minister, and for the 4 years she was the queen of the country till she was assassinated. The period after the assassination also was a period of turmoil. And I, during that period, looked at all these events, again, through the eyes of the common man, as to what was the impact of all these policies and all these so-called schemes that were being done. And the one cartoon that stands, or which I feel really encapsulates the whole situation in the country, was you have these politicians and bureaucrats and everybody else with plans and schemes and all sorts of ideas of how to improve the Aam Aadmi. And the Aam Aadmi still remains poor. And they say, we've tried everything and he still shows no improvement. The fault must be his. Now that is the attitude that I find is prevalent. That means people sitting in those ivory towers in Delhi are doling out all sorts of programs. But is anything really happening at the ground level? I left India in 1985. I was away for 20 years. Came back in 2005. And I was actually for a shock. Actually, not really a shock. I was awestruck. Things were different. I mean, there were glitzy malls, brand name stores, luxury cars by the dozen everywhere. And I thought, oh, India is now a developed country. It's no longer that so-called developing country. And I thought, that's great, that's wonderful for the country. But after staying for a few years and actually watching things around me, watching the news on the TV or reading the newspapers or interacting with people, I realized that things were not at all good. They were bad, in fact, rather very bad. And that's where I felt I need to analyze what's happening around and give my take on it. Actually, I was very angry. I was very, very angry that why is it that with all the resources we have, all the brilliance that is there in our people, where all the hard work is there, yet we are not really what we should be. People were being given fish, they were not being taught how to fish. And that really upset me. Looked around, saw the corruption. I mean, I remember reading news items of obscenely lavish weddings taking place, marriages taking place, and on the other side you would hear of farmers committing suicide because they couldn't afford to pay back a small little loan. You have leaders proclaiming, oh, I will make 1,000 crore statue, where there was a news item that a public school was being run in a cow shed, which would leak when it rained. This disconnect, especially when you're away for 20 years, you come back and you expect things to be better, and then you say, what's going on? And then you'll have leaders proclaiming, oh, we must teach our children in the regional language, and that's it, that's the only way to go, English is out. And yet they would send their own children to these elite English medium schools. there was hypocrisy everywhere. You scratched anything, there was hypocrisy. And as I said, it made me mad. Because I was looking at all these things. It didn't affect me. It didn't affect me at all. I mean, none of these issues really impacted my style of living, or whatever it is. But I said, why is it? And that is where I felt that through the only medium I know, which is cartoons, I said, let me give my take on what's happening. And perhaps, as a layperson, give my suggestions. This book, titled, Excuse Me, Can We Have Our Country Back, is a cry of the Aam Aadmi. It is a cry that has been getting louder. It has now become a roar. And the question comes in is that will this roar reverberate across the country? Will the Aam Aadmi get his country back? Stay tuned.
Fahad, you've been chronicling social change, but in print rather than through illustration, with the columns that you write, with the book that you've written, with all the work that you've done. Are you seeing this change? Are you seeing the change that Suraj talked about, that groundswell of public opinion, which is actually going to make a difference in the way governance takes place in this country, and more importantly, the people who govern, how they will change? Are you seeing any of this, or is this just a pipe dream for all of us in this room?
You know, thanks. My column is called Summer of Discontent, so automatically you understand that I necessarily am looking at things from a slightly pessimistic point of view, but that's not the case. I mean, I know that SK also is an eternal optimist. We all are, and that is the only way. But the cynicism creeps into all of us. The voice is necessarily sharp, pointed, and sometimes despondent, because we don't seem to see any silver linings around us. And I think this is the problem. Today, when this book was commissioned a little while ago, I think in terms of it, SK writes about the fact that nobody's wearing a Gandhi topi in this country. In the time it has come out, people have adopted the Gandhi topi. The Aam party has, Aam Aadmi party has used the Gandhi topi. So it is being there. These are very token changes that are taking place. The incidents of the last week have alienated hundreds of thousands of people like you and me, who had huge hope and aspiration for this viable third front that could emerge in this country. We were disenchanted with the Congress. We may not particularly subscribe to the views of the Bharatiya Janata Party. We saw this as this extraordinary opportunity. But the last week has disillusioned thousands of us. And I think this is really a country in flux. Here was a golden opportunity, and you've taken Kulhadi and hit it on your foot. And this is just an amazing. The polls were reflecting this man, this dynamic Arvind Kejriwal and his cohorts as a really amazing option that the country could have stood by. It could have become the groundswell. So to answer that question, Anish, of course, I know that this is something that we all feel strongly about, but it's just articulating the obvious that every time you think there's a ray of hope, unfortunately, something comes to, a cloud comes and obscures it.
Well, I suspect, SK, that you're going to have to start changing that symbol of the common man from being the Gandhi topi to being the muffler.
That's right.
I think you need to muffle them more than muffler them at this point.
Let me ask you, it's not just the politician, and it's very easy for us to throw stones at the elected representative because we've elected them. What about the rest of it? What about the bureaucracy? You touch on the bureaucracy in your work, in all your work. Are we going to see any change over there? I remember talking of columns for one of my columns in a Mumbai paper. The owner of the publisher actually called me one day and said, do me a favor, just don't mention the municipal commissioner's name for a while. And I said, why not? He says, well, he's kind of pissed at us. I said, so? He says, well, he's pissed at us because he's pissed at you. I said, what did I do? And he says, Anish, you called him a thief. You didn't imply he was a thief. You called him a thief. Now, no reporter in my newspaper is getting an interview, is getting anything from the BMC because of what you said. Are we going to see any change there?
My experience with bureaucracy goes a long way. I have a sister who is a bureaucrat, and she just recently retired at the secretary level. So I've had considerable interaction with bureaucrats. Let me tell you one thing. At least I'm not sure of the younger generation bureaucrats, but the older generation, they are brilliant, brilliant, brilliant people. There's no question about it. The unfortunate thing what happens to all that brilliance is that when they sit in all those different bhavans, Rail Bhavan or Krishi Bhavan or whatever else they sit there, and they survey their kingdom and the power that they have, because one signature of the bureaucrat can mean so many things, they tend to lose touch with reality. And the classic example, which I didn't know whether I should feel sad or should I laugh or should I do what, I don't know, when there was that profound statement made that the average person can live on 27 rupees a day or 32 rupees a day or something like that, you know. I said, what are these guys thinking? Where are they sitting? Are they sitting in their ivory towers totally disconnected from reality? And it gets you thinking that, yes, what use is all that brilliance if you don't have your feet on the ground? And that's where I feel that unless their attitude changes, where they sort of like get out of the office. I mean, as I said, the only thing I can think about is perhaps like the good old days, you know, the king or whoever was the minister would go in incognito at night and go look around, get a feel of the, you know, the pulse of the people, and then understand what their what ground level reality was. If they don't do that, then they're just doing a disservice to their, to their position, and I don't see any change happening in that sense. And I brought this out in one of the cartoons in the book, where these suited bureaucrats are sitting there and they see the Aam Aadmi, say, yeah, I think I've seen that guy on TV once, you know. That is the thing. They are not able to understand the situation on ground. I mean, there's a very classic example, and I did some illustrations for the posters for this program. Now here they're sitting in their whatever war room in the whatever development bhavan or whatever they call it, and drawing up plans of how they should have lavatories for people. I mean, we have the biggest problem is that, sanitation and how to get around it. So these guys drew up fabulous plans. So I illustrated those plans. It looked great. It looked wonderful. How to use local resources to create toilets for the villagers. And sure enough, all this is publicized, and they made all these little lavatories for the villagers to use with all whatever techniques they thought of. And finally they found that the villagers found it more convenient to store their grain in those lavatories and go and still use the outside. So that means they plan, but in a vacuum. They don't understand the psychology of the people. They don't understand what are their real needs, what can be, like getting them involved. So until that attitude changes, where they interact with people, get, like more proactive with the people, I don't see much change.
Well, is India actually looking for that change? The three of us are sitting over here pontificating, and I see a couple of heads nod in the audience every time I say something, but that might just be because you're asleep. But apart from a handful of us, we talked about this when we started, does anyone really care? Does that Aam Aadmi, does that common man say, look, I'm more concerned about putting bread on my table than about all these issues that you guys are sitting over there talking about?
Well, I think this is one of the things that I also picked up from the book, and it echoed a sentiment I've had and felt for a long time, is the sense of how the real Aam Aadmi is manipulated wildly by politicians, by vested, because they see them as vote banks. So there is absolutely no incentive. It is not in the interest of the politician to actually help these people. So therefore, if they cannot, if the fact that we are all in agreement that education, and yes, English, is a way forward. This is a way for advancement. They will not send they will not ask, they want them to live in, only have Marathi medium or Tamil or Telugu as the case may be, but will send their own children to St. Xavier's College and St. Stephen's. Now, this is the dichotomy, the fact that it is not in their interest to integrate them into the mainstream, because these vote banks. So you play on parochialism, you play on language issues, on regionalism, and you suppress. And I think that is really which is something that is becoming manifest.
Yeah.
What's your take on that?
See, my take is like talking about the same thing about education, about English especially. Or actually, I'll broaden the scope of my comments, and that is the RTE. It's a very sensitive subject, and what I will say may not go well with a lot of people, but it's a question of, I've been through RTE. I'm from a very, very, very primitive village in Kashmir. There was no sanitation, there was no running water, there was no electricity, there was nothing. We moved out of Kashmir just before the partition took place, and my father was in the army, so we got out and we were in Ranchi, and we were admitted into, by that time the British had left, and all these very exclusive British schools were all now thrown open to the general public. So we were some of the few Indians who first, me and my siblings were the first few who were admitted to that school, really highbrow English school. And you can visualize that this so-called rarefied, school, and here are these 4 urchins from the village. I can still remember all that stuff. And it was a sort of an RTE. We had the right to enter the school and get educated. And you have to believe me that in 1 year's time in that school, I was transformed from a village urchin into a brown sahib, sitting on the table, eating with knife and fork, dressing up in suits. So one would straight away come to the conclusion that RTE is the way out. It will bring out everybody. It will bring out, the poor will suddenly become middle class. But what I think the people who planned the RTE forgot, or maybe didn't take into account, was that we were in boarding school. We lived in that place for 1 year, went through the whole pace. RTE in its current form is saying, okay, 100 children, okay, 25, okay, here you can go to cathedral. That's what RTE basically means, is that kid has every right to go to cathedral, and cathedral has to accept it. So my take is, that's all very well. So those 25 kids get a chance to experience a very elitist sort of surrounding, get educated by the best of teachers, get laboratories, clean bathrooms, everything. Wonderful, great. My question came in, why only the 25? What about the 75 others? Why not them? So then the question arose, why do we need to only consider 25? Why can't we consider 100 of these kids and set up schools? We have set up Sainik schools, we have set up central schools, we have, I don't know if you're aware of it, in Delhi there is a school only for the bureaucrats, which is, I believe, very, very, of a very high standard. And these are all funded, programmed, and controlled and administered by the government, and given resources. Why can't we create schools for similar kids from the economically weaker sections? Create them, what I call them Bharatiya schools, Bharatiya Vidyalayas. Why can't we do that? Instead of building a 1,000 crore statue somewhere, why can't they build, it doesn't make sense to me. I just can't understand how we are so lopsided in our vision of the future. And like we agreed on, that education is the only way out, and education in English. Again, I hate to sound again like, I know I'm not the typical Aam Aadmi, but, well, due to circumstances, I have a driver, I have a maid, I have a cook, I have this, that. All of them want to send their children to, not want to, they are sending their children to English medium schools. We are helping them by, okay, I'll pay for this, I'll pay for that, I'll help you there. And there's one cartoon in this book which talks about RTE. And when the maid saw it, she started crying. Because, does the Aam Aadmi really feel it? Yes, they feel it deep inside, they feel it. They want to give their children a better future. They don't want them to become maids again. And the only way out for them is through learning English. So they do feel it. But again, as I said, there may be, as you said, whether sanitation is as important to them. I would think it should be a natural thing. I mean, in the sense that when they see around things happening that way, maybe they also feel that why are they not entitled to have something similar, if not the best? So I have a sense that maybe, yes, the Aam Aadmi is awakening to these realities, and they are expecting something to happen.
Let me throw some numbers around here. India apparently has 75% literacy across the country, which means we have 900 million literate people in this country. We have 200 to 250 million people who read and write English, which means we have more English-speaking people in this country than in the United States of America. But is that the only way forward? So I'm going to actually play the bad guy on the dais over here and disagree with the two of you. Yes, I think education is important. I think education is a must. I think the only way we will propel our country out of being a developing, underdeveloped, whatever name we are currently being called by the United Nations, the only way we will move forward is through that education. But must that education only happen in English? इथे किती मराठी माणूस आहेत ना? एज्युकेशन आहेत ना? शाळेत गेलेत ना सगळं? हो? बस तर. Why only English? Why can we not recognize the fact that this country has 22 languages, each one of them are as important as the other? That boy there, that man there, that man there are no less educated than you and I.
Okay, my take on that is, see, everybody aspires to go up in life, okay? Now, as far as I know, and this again, as a lay person, I don't have statistics with me, but I would feel that the jobs that are advertised, the jobs that pay well, the jobs that will give you upward mobility, will, or at least as far as I know, require the English language. So is it, education is one thing, but education which can get you a job is another thing. So yes, by all means, what I actually in my book I've talked about is, yes, you should never, ever let go of your culture and your identity. But at the same time, English is not a foreign language, it is a linked language. It is a globally linked language now. So if somebody wants to move up and away, it is a tool. So it's not that English is absolutely essential, but it is a tool that will help you move upwards. Otherwise, you will remain, that means if you are only in Marathi, that means if you go to another state for a job, you'll be at a loss. Whereas, that means you are only confining yourself to a job within your state. Is that what you want? You want to remain in that state? Or would you want to say that if there's a job in, say, in the Northeast for an engineer, and you only talk Marathi, what are your chances? So that is the only reason. It's not that you disown your this thing. That you should be proud of that. But in addition to that, you should aspire for something which will get you that upward mobility, not only in the state level or the country level, but throughout the world. So to that extent, as I said, it's the only thing. It is something that is a tool in your hand, which will allow you to move up. So that's.
Fahad, I take it you're agreeing with this.
And I would say that this whole bunch here, all educated, young, dynamic Maharashtrian boys are truly educated, but Aditya Thackeray went to St. Xavier's College. Correct? So that is the difference. You are here at a non-fiction English literary festival. The fact that you're here at 12 on a Saturday, not too many people are out and about, is fantastic.
School trip, right?
Oh, dates. But no, don't forget, Aditya Thackeray went to St. Xavier's College.
No, this is very important because, and that's what I brought out in my book. That means it's like, and again, I try to analyze it. why is it? Why are the leaders, whether it's Maharashtra, whether UP, Bihar, everybody says, no, we will only teach on this, or we'll only teach on that. And what happened? Now they've suddenly realized that, no, English is important. And suddenly now they're, turning the whole thing over. And because it's not, see, we must get over that mindset that English is a reminder of our colonial past. Okay, the English did some bad things, but they did some good things either. They also did some very, very nice things. They laid down railways. I mean, I know they did it for their own personal reason. They wanted to take the wealth out of the country. So what better way to do it than to set up a rail network and have all the wealth taken out? But in the bargain, they left behind the railways, and it's a big help now. So, we have to be a little more discreet in trying to make a sort of a statement on the legacy of the British. And they gave us this language which is now giving us jobs. All the IT jobs or all the BPO jobs, etc., are all because our kids can speak English. So, regional pride, national pride are good things, are important things. But we mustn't just take English as a legacy of the British, which has to be eradicated, erased, and removed from our society. No, take it as a positive thing they left behind, which we have to build on, and hopefully, as I said, allow our kids, allow our students to seek wider, broader, and more distant horizons. So that is the only reason. I mean, it's not because you should lower the sort of importance of your regional language or your regional upbringing, but why not aspire for something beyond?
And I feel that instead of foisting Hindi as a lingua franca of this country,
yeah.
English is an Indian language.
Absolutely.
And therefore, let English be the lingua
exactly.
franca.
That's exactly what I said. Link language. See,
Yeah.
there has to be a link language. See, you can have, we are actually, India can be almost considered like a little mini Europe. Because each state is different in terms of their culture, their language, their food habits. So basically, we are all diverse units. So how do we link up all these? And as I said, the moment they tried to do it way back, and I still remember the first cartoon I drew was when in Tamil Nadu there was this, when they started putting Hindi as a thing, and then people reacted against that. And the first cartoon I drew, this would have been in the 50s, and I was a kid at that time. But I felt so strongly about it. And there were these little kids fighting for, we don't want Hindi, we don't want Hindi. And then I think there was a lathi charge or something there, and a couple of kids got killed. But they didn't realize that, yes, you're proud of your language, you're proud of your state, so you can't impose Hindi on others, whereas English already is there throughout the country. So just be gracious and say, okay, it's not a colonial legacy, it is an important tool that we are in possession of and which we should build on and take ourselves forward.
In fact, Pope Francis has now sort of said that the internet is God's gift, which is wonderful,
Yeah.
Cosmic creation. But Mulayam Singh Yadav not so long ago was anti-computers,
Yeah.
And today this group over here, you all know how to work computers, you're all computer literate. What is the language of computers primarily today is English. So if you have even a working knowledge, it doesn't have to be your primary language, but certainly, even as a functional second language, why not?
Strangely enough, a couple of years ago, I was on a stage like this with Narendra Modi, and I'm reasonably fluent in Gujarati. So I talked to him in Gujarati, and he talked to me in English. And it was the strangest conversation I've ever had. Because for half an hour I spoke Gujarati, for half an hour he spoke English. But we both understood each other, so at least that was okay. Now, let's look at that link, and I'm going to come back to your profession and the reason we're on this stage. Is the cartoon that link? Is it the language that goes beyond language? Does it say for all of us what we are thinking without the need for words?
I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Yes, in the sense that as a cartoonist, you can't learn to be a cartoonist. You have to evolve as a cartoonist. And that evolution process started when I was 12 years old. So it is something that instinctively grows, and you start looking at everything in a totally different perspective. You never look at, or never take anything at face value. You always try and say, okay, this has happened. Is there another explanation for it? Is it a devious thing that is being done by somebody? So you are always, everything is suspect. So you start with that premise that everything's suspect, and then try and figure out what was the objective behind that. So basically, cartoons in a visual form convey what would normally take a few paragraphs of prose. So to that extent, yes, a cartoon is a way to transcend regional or rather language barriers. But again, sometimes the caption is important. So the caption, again, to capture that caption and the essence of that caption, you do need a sort of, as I said, a link language. The rest would be, of course, the cartoon itself. That would be self-explanatory. Now, again, we talked about this thing, what you talked about, how you had got into trouble because you called somebody Now, those of you who have a chance, actually in this book also there's that illustration. Now, I have a very, very, very negative opinion about politicians in general, I mean, in this sense. And my reading of them is, and again, I hope there's no politician around here. I think a whole lot of them are clowns. Now the question comes is, I had this problem that I wanted to show them as clowns, but I didn't want to say that they are clowns. So the question came in, how do I put across a visual where I, through the cartoon, say my bit, but yet don't use any words. So if you get a chance to go through this book, you will find that cartoon, and it's basically the typical Neta giving his speech, but around his neck, he's got that clown's little collar. So a person looking at it will say, yeah, this guy is a clown. But it's you who said it. I didn't say it. I just drew a picture. Now you have expressed the thing. So I got around that particular thing by letting the reader decide that this is my opinion. So that doesn't require any language. It didn't require any explanation. It is a visual image which conveys exactly an opinion. So to that extent, yes. Sometimes cartoons can convey things beyond any regional differences in cartoons, etc.
You know, for all the years that I was on radio, I'd have people say, oh, you make us laugh all the time on radio. And then they'd meet my wife and they'd go, he must be a complete barrel of laughs at home. He's so funny on radio, he must be making you laugh all the time. My wife would look at them and say, he doesn't say anything at home. So I'm gonna ask Mr. Sriram, you've got a cartoonist over here. He's supposed to be funny. Is he actually a funny guy?
He does take life in a very simple kind of a way. And you're right, we're not funny at home all the time. Sometimes I have to put him down because he takes things too, he's always looking for the funny part of things. And I keep saying, life couldn't be that simple.
It's so wonderful that we all have wives who have put us down. We are so blessed. Thank you.
Okay, we've been talking a long time, and this isn't supposed to be a lecture, this isn't supposed to be speeches that we make over here. So please feel free to jump in if you've got any comments.
Sharad Kumar, trustee in charge of elections in Agni, Action for Good Governance and Networking in India. Also the editor of Mumbai Verita. As far as the English is concerned, I would like to give you an example of what my maid servant told me. Sir, मला नाही झाले पण माझ्या मुलींना इंग्लिश मीडियमच्या शाळेत पाहिजे. And this is what the Aam Aadmi thinks. Whatever the politicians may say about regional language, they are not coming down on the regional language, but they would like their children to improve. Just as in a serial which is going on in Zee TV, the maid servant is there. She says, no, I want my daughter to become collector. And I want her to go to the... this is the attitude with the Aam Aadmi today.
Okay.
And another point, some points which you raised about Aam Aadmi also, insofar as elections are concerned. I think what Manishankar Iyer and the BJP person said, I think it's a fact in the sense, because we people don't go and vote, they don't treat us as citizens of this country. And they're right in a way, because they're concerned with the numbers and not the content. So we have to ensure that we go, and so far as the election commission is concerned, they have been trying to their level best to see that more and more people go and vote. In fact, in response to PIL in May 2004, the Supreme Court came out with an excellent order which made it compulsory for every candidate to file an sworn affidavit. Now, in that affidavit, all the details of the candidates have been there, which is educational qualification, age, asset, liability, criminal cases, if any, and whether PAN number is there or not. So these are the things which help the Aam Aadmi to come forward. And we in Agni, this affidavit is about nearly 12 to 13 pages, which for any, even an educated voter, it is mind-blogging to go through it. Now in Agni, we have come out with a single sheet, analyzing the thing, putting them together in one sheet of all the candidates in a particular constituency, what they have declared in their own affidavit. So what happens is, it helps the voter to decide whom his vote has to go. Now this is the real idea behind the Supreme Court ruling which said an informed choice. Now last year there was another Supreme Court order which made the political candidates who are tainted or who have cases which leads to about 2 years imprisonment are barred from standing for elections. Now this is another point where the political parties will have to think twice before putting such candidates. In other words, a voter has a better choice than in the earlier cases. Then the third point which again the Supreme Court came out is none of the above, which is the, so with the result, if people are not happy with the candidates, they have a choice of pressing the nota button on the EVMs. So this is another choice which they are having. And finally, the last choice is also, just as in America, there is the socialist alternative which has come up. And the first winner has been in Seattle, the Municipal Council. And coincidentally, she happens to be a Mumbai girl. I mean, it's so the same way in Aam Aadmi has come up, but we have to see how the things.
So I'm going to stop you there for a second and actually ask the room.
Yeah.
How many people were old enough? Just a second, I need a vote over here. How many people were old enough to vote in the last election? None of you were old enough to vote? No. You're all old enough to vote now? Yes? Are you registered voters? No. Are you going to vote in the next general election? 3 people are nodding their heads in the back. 3 people. That's your bloody your Aam Aadmi. Let me ask the room, does this room think that we have lost the country? The title of the book is, excuse me, are you saying excuse me? Are you saying can we have our nation back? Are you saying can we have our country back? Or do you think, what the hell, everything is okay, I am making money, I have a job? No? Okay. Negative reaction over there, negative reaction over there. Here's what we're going to do. We're actually going to, let's get around to launching the book.
Yeah.
Yeah? And then we're all here to talk more if you like.